Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first Wonderful Wives Sister Circle conference call. We are so excited that you have decided to join us today, and we look forward to having an awesome time with these next few minutes that we have together. Before we get started, I just want to give you an idea of how the call is going to be formatted. When everyone joins, they are muted, but we will have a time for discussion. And when the discussion time comes, I'm going to open up what's called a Q&A session. For those of you that have connected by phone, you will receive automated instructions about how to ask your question. And for those of you that have connected online, there'll be a pop-up window, and there'll be a button that says Ask My Question. So if you just click on that button, or for those of you that are online, when you follow those instructions, what will happen is it places you in a queue so that I can see that you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share, and we can just work our way down the queue. And when you are selected, you will, for those of you online, you'll receive a pop-up telling you that you're unmuted, and for those of you that are on the phone, it will give you an indication that it's time for you to ask your question or your comment. So we definitely want to make this an interactive time for all of us. And if you are online, you will see that there is a little conversation bubble. If you click on that conversation bubble, that will open up a chat session. And in that chat session, you can interact with everyone that's on the call. If you have a question as we're going through the presentation while you're muted, feel free to put that in the chat session so that I realize that you have something that you'd like to say. And we really want this to be a time, even though I have some information that I will be sharing, we really want this to be a sister circle and have everyone have an opportunity to share what you got from watching the video from Andy Stanley, or if something comes up in the conversation, in the presentation that you would like to have a conversation about, please indicate that, because one of the things, the tagline for Wonderful Wives is that we promote sisterhood, support, and marital success. And as part of the sisterhood and the support, that means that everyone has a voice. And while I'm discussing that, one of the biggest things, actually, let me just give you a history of where Wonderful Wives started. I had been married maybe a year or two, and we started having some issues that I felt like I needed to discuss, but I didn't feel like I had a safe place to discuss the issues that were on my mind. I didn't necessarily want to go to all of my friends because they had to live with my husband for the rest of my life, and I didn't want them to feel like every time they saw him, they were thinking of the things that I had said about him. When I went to some of the older ladies that were in my church, all they said was, "Oh, baby, you have to pray." So where Wonderful Wives is rooted is in those feelings that I had at that time. Those feelings of I didn't have a place to go. I didn't have a place that it was safe to say, "Oh, yes, I love my husband today and he's so wonderful." But it was also acceptable to say, "You know what, he is on my nerves so bad and I really just want to leave." So Wonderful Wives is a place where it's okay to say both. We want to celebrate together when things are good, but we also want to support one another and have a safe place where it's okay to say how we really feel. So in that vein, that's how we're going to move forward today. We want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we have limited this phone conversation to 1 hour, but I do not have 1 hour's worth of material to share, so I'm really hoping for some discussion. But if there is something that either we run over time or there's something that you feel that you would like to discuss more, even after the call has ended, we are going to stay on the line and have some more conversation if that's necessary. Or you can feel free to contact us by email. Our email is wonderfulwives2015@gmail.com. And we'll be more than happy to have a phone conversation, FaceTime, whatever you feel necessary, because, again, one of the pillars of Wonderful Wives is sisterhood and support. So we are here to support you in any way that we can help with your marriage. Okay, so I guess with all of that said, we will move on and get started for today. I'm sure that, or at least I hope that everyone on the line has had an opportunity to view the Andy Stanley video about expectations in marriage. But where this conversation started was actually with a Wonderful Wives meeting that we had several weeks ago, where we talked about dealing with unmet expectations. And the way that we defined expectations was as a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future, or a belief that someone will or should achieve something. And as we explored the idea of expectations, it was just amazing to us how we didn't even realize when we went into our marriages that we had some expectations and that we had some really strong beliefs that there were some things that were going to happen. And even if they didn't happen immediately, we discovered that some of us had some expectations that certain things would be in the future. And we really believed that. So when our husbands didn't necessarily achieve or help our family to achieve the things that we expected, then we started to have some issues. So we realized in our discussion that there are two categories, or at least we placed our expectations in two categories, and that's deal breakers and disappointments. And we define deal breakers as that catch that an individual cannot overlook and ultimately outweighs any redeeming quality that another person may possess. So for us, a deal breaker was that one thing that no matter how awesome we thought you were, no matter how gorgeous you were, or despite the fact that you had a great job and you had all this going for you, a deal breaker is that one thing that we just could not get past. And we define a disappointment as the feeling of being unhappy because something that we hoped for or expected did not happen, or because someone or something was not as good as we expected. And we have found in our discussion that many of us, throughout the years of our marriages, some disappointments have been small, some disappointments have been large. But what we discovered was that as we experienced these disappointments, especially the ones that seemed small, that they would just start to kind of pile up and they would stack up. So disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And some of us had just reached our breaking point where we had so many disappointments that they started to feel like deal breakers. We felt like, you offer a lot, but you know what, really, I don't know if there's enough here to make me want to even stay with you. And one of the most dangerous things that we discussed was that when we start feeling like it's a deal breaker, that's when some people are willing to walk away. But even more dangerous is when we decide to stay, but we disconnect. And that's when we live in the house, we take care of the kids, we handle our business, but there's absolutely no intimacy, no romance. It's almost like we're roommates or really great business partners. And that, even though you're together, raising the kids, paying the bills, that is not what marriage was designed to be. That is not the loving, supportive relationship that marriage should be, because the intimacy and all of that is just necessary. So that's why we decided that we had to deal with our unmet expectations, because we didn't want all those little disappointments to keep stacking up and eventually grow into a deal breaker. So even though that's how we defined expectations, Andy Stanley had a very interesting perspective as we watched the video. Because according to him in the video, we start off our marriages with a box full of desires. And they can be very good desires. They can be, way out to the left. But a lot of times we start in our boxes with just some very basic desires. But then at some point, those desires move over into an expectation box. And according to Andy, that's when the problems can start, because with expectations, that opens up the opportunity for us to be disappointed. That opens up the opportunity for us to be upset when something doesn't happen. If it's a desire and it doesn't happen, we can probably deal with that. But when it's an expectation, then we feel a sense of loss that can bloom into so many other things. So I thought some interesting questions for us as we were looking at our expectations, our desires and our expectations, would be to just ask ourselves the questions: what were my desires before we got married? Did any of those desires become expectations? And if any of those desires did become expectations, do I now feel like my husband owes me? Because that's something else that Andy Stanley talked about, is that when our expectations aren't met, that we start feeling like, hey, you owe me that because you told me before we got married, or you stood at the altar and you told everybody that you were going to do this and you haven't done it. So you owe me this. So I think it's time for us to take a journey, and a journey back to the beginning of our relationship. And this is something that I did as I was working through the worksheet for this activity. I had to really take a journey back to the beginning of my relationship with my husband, back when he was my boyfriend, back when he was my fiance, to really determine what my desires were. And I think that's an activity that would be good for all of us to do, because especially if you've been married for a while, there's so much life that has happened since they were our boyfriends, so much life, so many struggles that have happened since the time that we used to see them and our heart would pitter-patter, that you have to sometimes sit back and just take that journey, put all that life aside, and really try to tap into that young couple and remember the things that when we were dreaming about what our lives would be. Now, some people, in the conversations that we've had in our Wonderful Wives groups, some people really felt as if they got married so young they didn't really have any desires or expectations because they were too young to even try to think out their lives. But as we went through the conversation, they realized that they really did have some desires and some expectations, even though some of them may have been very basic, like, I expect that you will not cheat on me. I expect that you will not physically or verbally abuse me. Yes, those are some basic desires. But as we went through the activity of going back to looking at when we were just a young, happy, carefree couple, that there definitely were some things that we just expect. Like, we expected to be in love forever. We expected that our husbands would respect us and love us forever. We expected that, we would always have a roof over our head. We expected that we would grow old together. And for some people, those things are now in question. So let's take that trip back to the beginning and look at those things that we just thought that our lives would be, that we hoped that our lives would be. And the reason that we have to go back to the beginning is because that helps us examine our roots. For me, as I took my my journey back, one of my huge expectations was that we would be debt-free our entire marriage, and that I would be able to go and shop and travel and have this wonderful life. And when I looked back and I took that journey, that expectation had a wrong root, because number one, all I knew before we got married was that my husband was debt-free. I didn't know how that happened. I just figured, oh, he must be really great with money, so we're going to be debt-free. Even though I have an issue with spending and an issue with saving, he is going to do that, and I'm going to be able to have the marriage that my grandparents had, where my grandfather went out and he did all the work, and he just brought the money home, and he gave my grandmother the money, you know, here's money for groceries, here's money for this. Oh, you want a new dress? Here's some money for that. That's what I expected. But I never had the conversation with my husband about, oh, well, how do you handle your finances? How are you going to handle our finances? Okay, are we going to have the goal to be debt-free? How are you going to handle that? I never had that, but I didn't realize until I took that journey back what it was rooted in, that I didn't have the conversation with him, that I was expecting that our marriage would be like my grandparents' marriage. And when I took it back to that root, that helped me realize that sometimes now, when things are not financially as I wish that they would be, that I feel a certain way about that. Sometimes I experience some negative root activity, and I don't mean to blame him, but sometimes I do. So even if I don't say it, I've noticed that sometimes it still manifests, even if it's only through body language. So as I was examining roots, I went to a gardening site, because when I thought of a root, I thought of a plant or a tree or something like that. So I said, you know what, let me go to a site and see what a gardener has to say about roots. And I found this quote: "Did you know that what you see above ground in your plants is really determined by what's hidden underground? What happens underground, where the plant roots live, drives plant growth. The bigger and healthier the root system, the bigger and healthier the plant." So as I was looking for the root of where some of my feelings came from, and then when I considered this quote, it really helped me see that some of the issues that have manifested above ground in my marriage are a result of what's going on in the root system, because I put some things in the root system that shouldn't necessarily be there. And although that can be the same situation for our husbands, when we take the time to look at the root systems of our marriages, sometimes we can see that there are some adverse things that we put there based on our own unmet expectations. So I will open a Q&A session in just a minute. I need to get to the window so that I can do that. Okay. Okay. So during this Q&A session, what I would like us to talk about is, and I'm hoping that everyone had an opportunity to look at the video and the questions. And specifically, we'd like to talk about, did you have any desires that became expectations? Was there something that was in your desire box before you got married, and then once you walked down the aisle, it became an expectation? And also, I think it would be good for us to discuss if we feel that our husbands owe us. And if we do feel that our husband owes us, can you identify the root of that feeling? Can you take it back to, okay, well, maybe this is where that's coming from. Maybe I'm feeling resentful because there are some things that happen. Maybe he hurt my feelings or made me feel insecure about something, and now I'm realizing that that's where that's coming from. And thank you for your patience. This is my first time working with this this system, so thank you so much for your patience. Okay, well, if there's anyone that would like to make a comment, please, I hit something and I'm not sure if I disconnected the people in the queue or not. So if you did indicate that you wanted to have a conversation or say something, please try to do that again or say something in the chat. Okay. Well, in case I did disconnect anyone, I will leave the Q&A open so that we can come back to that if you're able to. Oh, or maybe I should close it out and open it again. I don't know. I'll leave it open. And if there's something that you'd like to say and I haven't responded from the queue, then please just hit us in the chat. Okay. So as we're dealing with our expectations and we may feel as if our husbands owe us, it's important that we figure out why we feel the way we do about certain things. If there's things that irritate us or are constantly coming up in our marriages, we need to take the time to figure out the why, because the why will help us get to the root of what's going on. And that's important because we can deal with the behaviors or the situations, but especially if it's something that's reoccurring, we need to take the time to get to the root of it, because if we keep dealing with what's going on above ground and don't deal with what's going on underneath, it will be a reoccurring issue. And to get the marriages that we know God has for us, we can't continue to allow things to constantly come up. Even though we may not understand how to deal with it at the time, it's important that we take the time to figure out the why. Because if we don't, it will just keep manifesting over and over and over again. Just like the quote from the gardening site, what we see above ground is really determined by what's hidden underground. So what do we do once we get to the root? That's an excellent question. If it's a root and it is causing negative things in our marriage, negative feelings, negative responses, we have to, as we've been saying this morning, take the time to examine it. We have to identify the who, what, where, when, and most importantly, we have to figure out the why. And examining it can be the hardest part because that's the first step that we have to take, and often that requires us to look in the mirror. It's easy for us to examine negative things that are going on above ground, because then we can look at, well, I didn't like when he did this and he did that and he's doing this. But when we go underground and have to look at what's going on in us, sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes that can even be painful, and we can have our feelings hurt by examining ourselves. But it's something that we have to be willing to do if we want to get the good results in our marriages. And the next thing that we have to do is cut it. And I got this outline for what to do by some of the reading that I got on the gardening website, because it was talking about how to get rid of roots in a tree, meaning that they didn't want to kill the tree, but they wanted to kill the root or get rid of the roots that were running amok. So after you examine it, you have to cut it. You have to make a conscious decision that you are no longer going to act on that root. So we have to pay attention to what we're thinking. We have to pay attention to our actions, what we're doing, and sometimes even our body language. Because in conversations that I've had with my husband, I've realized that some of the actions that I take thinking that I'm making things better are actually making things worse. But I would have never known that if I hadn't discussed it with him. And I've even noticed that sometimes my body language says what I'm not saying out of my mouth. So I've had to make some conscious decisions not to act on some of my roots. And once we examine what it is, we've gotten to the who, what, when, where, why. We have to make the conscious decision that we're not going to continue with dealing with things the way that we have dealt with them in the past. So we examine it, we cut it, but then we have to block it. And this is something that I found very interesting when I was on the gardening site, because apparently there's what they call root blockers that you can buy at like Home Depot or something like that, so that once you cut off the roots that have gone the wrong way, you put this root blocker in the way so that they cannot go back that way again. And there's even some that are so large that you can put it around the entire root system to make sure that it stays with the way you want it to be. So for us in our marriages, after we examine our root, we cut it off, the way that we block it is to avoid the triggers that would encourage us to return to our pre-root surgery thoughts or actions. And that can be people, that can be conversations, that can be our own thoughts, going down memory lane, but not a happy memory lane, a negative memory lane. So we have to figure out what our triggers are that have led us to that behavior in the first place, but we have to block it so that once we have cut it off, that we don't return to the place that we have cut off. And then finally, we have to replace it. When we encounter a situation that used to encourage a negative response, we have to replace it with a positive response. And what that means is one of the examples that I shared in our sister circle meeting, I said that my husband has an Amazon, I don't want to say addiction. He enjoys purchasing things off of Amazon. So quite often when I come home, there's a box from Amazon on the door or on the porch. So the way I used to respond to that was, even if I didn't say it, I would roll my eyes or I could feel my jaw tightening. So now the way that I deal with that, when I come home and I see the box, I just smile. I smile because I realize that, okay, I am making this conscious decision. And as I smile, that is going to show me, that's going to be a reminder to me that I am purposely choosing not to get upset about that Amazon box. So we have to examine our root, we have to cut it off, we have to block it, and then we have to replace it. Now, some of you might be saying, you know what, that is a lot of work. Why would I even try to go through all of that to remove a root? And for some of us, it's even what makes that feeling even stronger is that we have the feeling like we're doing all of this work and our husbands are doing nothing to try to make things different in our marriages. Well, I want to play a clip from the video that we've watched from Andy Stanley. And I think he has an answer for why we might want to do all of that work.
And no matter what he does, he just feels a little less than, because a legitimate desire migrated into the category of an expectation. Let me just say it again. And you may argue all day long that these are justified. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to change a thing. All I'm saying is this. As long as it's here, you will live and conduct your marriage from the standpoint of you owe me. And when two big I's get locked in a battle of you owe I and I owe your I and you owe my I more than I, and I'm not going to pay your I till you pay my, as long as there's that you owe me, and I'm doing my part, how are you doing your part, as long as it's there, romance, intimacy, community, connection is gone. Because you don't have that kind of relationship with people you're in a debtor relationship with. And the opportunity to express or receive or even identify unconditional love is down the drain. It's gone. Because of what's in that box.
That, for me, was a motivator for me to do the work. Because as I looked and I considered my journey back to the beginning, and I remembered those two young people that were so in love and always holding hands and who used to sit on the couch wrapped in each other's arms watching TV and just talked for hours about just life, their dreams, desires, things that were going on. And then I compared that young couple to where we are now, 20 years later. Even though we're not in a bad space, I had to admit that I missed some of what I had from when we were dating. I missed that couple from 20 years ago. Now, does that mean that we are going to be the same today as we were then? Of course not. There's no way that we've both matured, we've changed, we've grown. But I made the decision that I no longer want some of the things that I've been feeling, some of the desires that became expectations. And as I did the workshop, I had to admit there were quite a few things that I felt like my husband owed me. And perhaps those things that I felt like he owed me is what contributed to that young couple that could talk for hours and hold hands and just be so excited to see one another. Perhaps that contributed to where we are today. So I submit that it is worth the work for us. Even if we don't see or perceive that our husbands are trying as hard as we are, our marriages are worth the work. Because at some point, we love that man enough to say that we would be with him until death do us part. At some point, there was something about him that was just so special and so wonderful that we knew that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives with them. And since we made that decision, I think we owe it to ourselves and to our marriages to do what we can for our lives, for our relationships, and even to support and encourage our husbands to do everything that we can to have the lives that God created for all of us, the lives that God wants for all of us. So as a review of what we talked about today, we have to be willing to examine our expectations and search for the root of our anger, our disappointment, or even our frustration. Because as we journey back to the beginning of our relationships and we identify those desires that became expectations, or even look at our unmet expectations that may have become you owe me, it helps us get to the root of the matter. And all of us have a root for something. So we have to be willing and determined to do the work to remove the root. We have to examine it, cut it, and we have to put up a barrier to prevent it from growing back. And then we have to replace all of that with something that's beautiful and that can grow, that can cause our relationships to grow. So again, before we end this call, I'm going to try again to open the lines in case anyone has something that they want to say. And again, thank you so much for your patience. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Okay. Really don't know what I'm doing here, but hopefully you did receive something. If you would like to make a comment, if not, please indicate that in the chat. Okay. Before we end the call, I would like to take the opportunity to share with you about an exciting event that we have coming up. We are having our very first retreat, and it is scheduled for October 14 through 16, and it will be held at the Hilton Washington Dulles Airport in Herndon, Virginia. It's going to be a very exciting weekend. Our topic for the whole weekend will be One Flesh, One Vision. And our goal is just to provide an opportunity for couples to have some time away to really just work on the unity in their marriages. We're going to have workshops to talk about how to increase our oneness and how, once we get that, how we can maintain it. Because I think that we started off with an idea of oneness, and some of us have even achieved it at different places in our marriage, but sometimes we just need some little touch-ups. We need to keep the communication going, and we're just very excited about this retreat. We're going to start it off on Friday with a Friday fun night, which will have just some fun things that we can do as couples and have the opportunity to meet other couples that are really trying to make marriage work and not trying to run for the hills. We're going to close out on Saturday with a Vision of Love dinner dance. And the ballroom is absolutely gorgeous and windows forever. You can see Dulles Airport. It's just a very romantic environment. So if you're looking for some time to get away with your husband, a nice long weekend, this is a perfect opportunity. And if you are trying to increase the oneness in your marriage, we would love for you to join us. So if there's nothing that anyone would like to share, I want to take the time to thank you for participating in this sister circle. If you enjoyed it, please invite others. We have our next sister circle, the one in person, will be on Friday, August the 12th at 7 p.m. at the Wegmans in Woodmore Town Center in Glen Arden, Maryland. And if you're joining us online, we are going to come together again on Saturday, August the 13th at 11 a.m., the same information that you used to join in today. So I invite you to visit our website. It is www.wonderfulwives.org. We are going to post the slides from today, so you can go there and see the slides and you can download them. And you can also register for the retreat on our website. If you go to our homepage, there is a link at the top entitled Retreat. So you can go there and you can register right there on our website. So again, I want to thank you so much for being a part of our very first Sister Circle. And I look forward to working with you and talking to you again. Watch your email because we're going to send out the video for the second session next week. So again, I'm very excited that you joined us today. feel free to go to our website and make comments or send us an email at wonderfulwives2015@gmail.com. Thank you and have an awesome weekend.